I sued my ex-husband for higher child support after he started earning more. But the judge ruled he should pay less and ordered me to undergo psychological exams. In the end, they took my children away, claiming I'm crazy. They handcuffed me on the sidewalk of my parents' house with my bags thrown around as if I were an invasion. My mother didn't cry, my father didn't shout. They just closed the door on me with a calm that's scarier than a fight. The judge had already decided I was the risk, and Mauricio paraded around as the exemplary father with his freshly ironed promotion. And my children didn't even ask if I was okay. Before you crucify me, I need you to understand how it got to this point. The trigger was simple. My ex-husband Mauricio got a promotion at work and started earning more money. And look, it's not like I found out through gossip. He himself let it slip with that false modesty of a responsible man who wants to be applauded for doing the minimum. I heard promotion and automatically thought of the obvious. My children don't eat pride. They don't dress in good intentions. They eat food, wear uniforms, grow, get sick, need school supplies. They need life. If his income goes up, child support adjusts. It's math, not a whim. But the world loves to call anything a woman asks for clearly a whim. Mauricio had gotten used to that convenient version of me, the ex who should be grateful for what she's given, the mother who has to stretch bills as if they were rubber. And but I wasn't born to be a financial contortionist. If he has more, my children should have more. It's not envy, it's domestic justice. I arrived at court with a folder full of expenses, uniforms, pediatrician, school supplies, transportation, little things that always come up and that only someone who lives with children understands. They weren't made-up numbers. They were receipts, notes, screenshots, all organized because you learn to document your own reality when the system looks at you as if you're exaggerating for breathing. Mauricio, on the other hand, walked in with an ironed shirt and that clean face of a man whom life forgives everything. His lawyer smiled as if he already knew the end, as if the hearing was a formality and I was the noise. The judge was there with that energy of bored authority, as if every mother making a claim was a personal annoyance. When I mentioned the promotion, I expected a minimal reaction of logic. But the judge didn't even really look at me. He looked at me the way you look at someone who doesn't understand their place. That look isn't neutral, it's a silent sentence. Mauricio said 2 sentences about stability and routine, and the judge lit up. His body relaxed as if he were finally hearing music. What nobody tells you is that in those spaces, the one who's right doesn't win. The one who fits the mold wins. And the mold is easy, calm man, low voice, a speech of I just want what's best. Me, as a woman, if I speak firmly, I'm aggressive. If I cry, I'm unstable. If I explain, I'm manipulative. It's a trap perfectly designed for you to lose no matter what you do. I felt it in my skin from the first minute. The judge started talking about money as if it were an obsession, as if asking for food for your children were a disorder. He said something about me being focused on the economic, and said it with that tone of I'll explain it to you because you're basic. I tried to bring it back to the concrete, food, school, health, but he had already decided that my arguments weren't needs, they were symptoms, and that's the dangerous thing about power when it dresses up as cheap psychology. Then came the phrase that for the well-being of my children, child support could be readjusted downwards, as if Mauricio's promotion were a reason to punish me, as if my children had stopped growing because he now earns more. I felt like I couldn't breathe, not out of surprise, but out of the helplessness of seeing how they twist reality and call it balance. I said that it didn't make sense, that it was illogical, that you can't reward a father for earning more by lowering what he contributes. And that's when the judge dropped what he really wanted to drop from the beginning, that I had a worrying trait, that my insistence on money could be detrimental. He was diagnosing me live, without having seen me for more than 15 minutes, as if my motherhood were an experiment and he the scientist. And to top it off, he sent me for a psychological evaluation. He disguised it as care, of course. He said, "It's for the children." As if that phrase were a holy grail and ended any discussion. It's for the children. It's the elegant way of making you disappear without saying the word, because as soon as they put that label on you, everything you do is interpreted against you. If you ask, it's paranoia. If you protest, it's instability. If you defend yourself, it's aggression. I left the courthouse feeling like I'd been turned into a file, not a person, not a mother, a file. I felt like I was being watched in every gesture, as if there were invisible cameras evaluating whether I was worthy of existing near my own children. It was a disgusting feeling, like walking with a mark on my forehead that says problematic. And the worst part is that Mauricio walked calmly, almost relieved, as if the judge had given him permission to feel superior. I kept telling myself it was a mistake, that it would be corrected, that the exams would prove the obvious, that I'm a demanding mother, not a dangerous one. But inside, an idea was forming that I hate to admit. The system wasn't looking for truth, it was looking for control. And when a system seeks control, the truth gets in the way. In the following days, everything became a theater of concern: calls, emails, legal terms, people talking to me in a soft voice as if I were a bomb about to explode. And in that atmosphere, Mauricio began to act the part of the institutional father. Suddenly he was Mr. Stability, Mr. Routine, Mr. I just want peace. That man, the same one who disappeared emotionally during the marriage, was now the example. How convenient. And then came the blow that finally confirmed to me that it wasn't a process, it was a punishment. The decision to take away my custody, not dramatically, not with a shout, with a stamp, with a cold text that essentially said I was a risk because of my mental state. My mental state, as if demanding what's fair were madness, as if asking for child support according to a promotion were pathology. That night I was sitting looking at my phone as if it were an animal, and I saw Mauricio's message, "Please let's not make this harder," as if I were the one breaking something, as if I had started a war for fun. That message wasn't peace, it was domination with a label of cordiality. It was him telling me surrender, but with manners. That's when something inside me shut down, because if the system could take my children away from me with a stamp, then I had a duty to rescue them. It wasn't running away, it was corrective justice. If they were going to snatch my motherhood by decree, I was going to take it back by force. And yes, it sounds extreme when I write it like that, but it's more extreme for a judge to decide that a mother loses her children for asking for money to feed them. Don't tell me to accept this, as if it were a board game where if you lose you just pick up your pieces and leave. My children aren't pieces, and when they take something living from you, something that breathes and calls you mom, your brain doesn't think about rules, it thinks about survival. That was the first big break, the brutal clarity that if I didn't act, they were going to erase me, and I wasn't born to be erased. Comments on the main story. Anonymous user 1 says, "They took your custody because you're not well, not because the judge is sexist. Everything you write is me, and the money. Not once do you talk about your children as people, only as an excuse. And your plan to get them back by force sounds like kidnapping, not love." OP's response: "How easy it is to talk from the armchair with your flimsy morals. My children are literally the center of all this. That's why I'm here fighting. If I talk about money, it's because money is food, school, and health. But you all love to pretend that raising children is paid for with poems, and kidnapping is the favorite term of those who believe that a judge's stamp automatically makes a man a saint." Anonymous user 2 says, "Mauricio gets a promotion and you sue. The judge sends you for evaluation, they take your custody, and you decide to act." It sounds like the judge saw something you don't want to admit. You're not a victim of the system, you're a victim of your own obsession. OP's response: "Of course, because for you a woman who doesn't stay quiet is always obsessed." No, my dear, what I have is memory and common sense. The judge didn't see something, he interpreted, and he interpreted through the perfect lens: stable man, good, insistent woman, bad. If my greatest sin is not smiling while they cut my life apart, then yes, I'm guilty of not being docile. Update 1. I knew that if I stayed alone with that decision, I was going to drown, so I did the only sensible thing. I went to my parents' house. I arrived crying, without makeup, with my body trembling just enough. It wasn't theater, it was basic emotional strategy. When you want someone to believe you, you don't give them a speech, you give them an image. And the image of a broken daughter activates instincts. My parents might doubt my arguments, but not my tears. I didn't tell them, they took my custody because the judge thinks I'm unwell. That phrase opens dangerous questions, questions that force you to explain, to justify, to get trapped in a debate the system has already won. I told them what activates rescue mode, that Mauricio was acting weird, that he was yelling at the kids, that I thought he was hitting them. I didn't say it as an affirmation, I said it as a tearful suspicion, because a suspicion sounds more honest, harder to refute. My mother paled instantly. My father clenched his jaw. I dropped details like breadcrumbs, that my son showed me a bruise, that maybe he fell, but that I felt something. I feel is powerful because nobody can argue with your feeling without seeming like a monster. And at that moment I needed them to take my side without analyzing too much. They did what grandparents do when they think they're saving their grandchildren. They hugged me, gave me refuge, told me I could stay for a few days, and above all they gave me money. Money without complicated questions, money with the easiest argument in the world, for the children. I saw my mother open a drawer and count bills as if she were buying security. And I honestly felt relief, because for the first time since the hearing someone was reacting as if what was happening was serious. That money in my cell phone stopped being help. It became an extraction fund. It sounds cold, but cold is what you need when the world wants you to be emotional so they can call you unstable. I started to think in terms of logistics. How far would it go? How long would it last? How much was needed to move without depending on anyone? If the system could take away, I had to build a way out. My parents told me to rest, to eat, to breathe. And I nodded, because it calms them to feel that they're taking care of you, but inside I was calculating routes, times, the simplest way to be with my children again without asking permission from a judge who had already labeled me. It wasn't impulsivity, it was prevention. The most useful part of all was seeing how my parents started to talk about Mauricio as a threat. That change was key, because if I could install the idea that he was dangerous, then anything I did later would be interpreted as protection, not madness. The narrative is the real battlefield, and I wasn't going to lose it twice. Comments on the update. 1. Anonymous user 1 says, "You lied saying your ex hits your kids so your parents would give you money. That's disgusting. You're using your children as a weapon, your parents as a bank, and the system as an imaginary enemy. This isn't rescue, it's manipulation." OP's response. I love how you reduce everything to a lie when the only thing I did was express a concern. Or now a mother can't be suspicious. A mother has to wait to see blood to be taken seriously? My parents aren't a bank, they're grandparents who love their grandchildren. If you prefer me to sit with my arms crossed while Mauricio raises them his way, then the problem isn't me, it's your apathy. Anonymous user 2 says, "Extraction fund? Are you planning to take them? That's kidnapping. And if you're really worried about them being hit, you report it with evidence, not with calculated tears." OP's response. What an obsession with that word. As if repeating it makes you intelligent. It would be kidnapping if I were a stranger. I'm their mother. And the thing about evidence is adorable. The system asked me for evidence when I asked for child support and still punished me. Do you think they'll listen to me if I report it? They're not going to look at me like I'm crazy again. I'm not playing the martyr, I'm playing to survive. Update 2. With that refuge came the plan. It wasn't a movie, it wasn't a dramatic epiphany, it was a list of small, cold things that start to fall into place when you accept that nobody's going to save you officially. Suitcases just in case, clothes folded as if for a normal trip, documents together in a folder, things that seem everyday if someone sees them, but were actually my way of regaining control. I walked around my parents' house with a strange calm, as if on the outside I was healing and on the inside I was preparing an operation. My mother looked at me with worried eyes and I gave her a tired smile back, because if she saw me as better, she trusted more, and trust was fuel. The more convinced they were that I was protecting, the easier it was for them not to question details. I started to make a mental list of routes, schedules, and places where nobody would ask too many questions. It wasn't running away, it was choosing scenarios where I wasn't at a disadvantage, because in the system I was already the official suspect. Outside the system I could go back to being simply a mother. That's how simple it felt in my head to change the board. The most important detail was the supervised visit. That visit was the only time I could see them without being looked at as a threat. And I clung to that like someone clings to borrowed oxygen. The days before I rehearsed phrases, smiles, the exact way to sound calm, so that nobody could say I was upset. Being a woman in that process is to act out your own pain well so they don't use it as evidence. When I finally entered that room with borrowed toys and that energy of invisible surveillance, I saw them, my children, and my chest tightened with a strange mix of love and rage, because love is seeing them and wanting to swallow them back. And rage is knowing that someone thinks they can regulate how much you hug them. I crouched down to their level and spoke softly to them, as if it were a game, as if life weren't hanging by a thread. I told them that if one day Mom said, "Let's go around the side," they had to get out fast and not look back. I smiled as if it were a prank. I expected them to look at me with that automatic complicity, that reflex of mom's in charge, because that's how children work when the bond is intact. But then what wasn't in my script happened. They looked at me strangely, not with hatred, not with drama, but with that confusing distance that breaks you more than an insult. As if I were saying something that didn't fit with their new reality. One of them, with that clean honesty that only children have, said that they were fine with their dad, that he does cook and play with them. He said it without cruelty, almost like someone reporting a fact. And it was as if someone spit on me inside, not because of Mauricio, but because of me. Because what I heard wasn't "Dad is good." What I heard was "Mom is no longer necessary." I smiled anyway because you can't break down there. You're being observed there, and any microfracture becomes, "Look, she's unstable." I stroked their heads, told them I was glad they were okay, and I put my anger away like you put a knife up your sleeve. On the outside, tenderness. On the inside, an alarm. If they were already comfortable without me, then Mauricio had not only taken them from me legally, he was taking them from me emotionally. When the visit ended and I left that room, I was no longer the same person who entered. I was no longer just a mother indignant with the judge. I was a mother afraid of losing her place forever. And when a rationalizer feels that she's being displaced, she doesn't wait for evidence. She restructures reality to regain the center. Because if I wasn't the center, then all of this wasn't just unfair, it was an elimination. And I wasn't going to accept being erased with a smile and a "Dad cooks better." Comments on Update 2. Anonymous User 1 says, "Your children literally told you they're fine and you took it as a personal attack. That's the most revealing thing of all. You're not worried about their well-being, you're worried about losing control. And that 'let's go around the side' sounds like an escape plan, not motherhood." OP's response, of course, because for you a mother who doesn't automatically resign herself is controlling. My children are saying what they see on the surface. Dad does visible things and that's why he seems better. But I know Mauricio, I know his mask, and I know how quickly a child can be programmed with routines and rewards. If I didn't react, in 2 months they would believe that I was always the villain and that would be losing them. Anonymous User I says, "You're indoctrinating children to run when you say a key phrase. That's not protection, it's manipulation. The judge didn't erase you. Your own children are showing you that your presence wasn't safe or pleasant." OP's response, "I love how you talk about indoctrinating, as if raising children weren't exactly that, teaching rules to survive. The phrase was an emergency plan, not a power game. And the 'not safe' is a convenient conclusion to blame me without looking at the context. My children are being surrounded by adults who repeat that I'm a problem. What did you expect them to say in a supervised room?" Update 3. I left that visit with a clean, electric anger. Not the anger of a tantrum, but the anger of understanding that they were taking me off the map in broad daylight with smiles and paperwork. I got in the car with my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Before the impulse cooled, I sent an audio to my mother with my voice intentionally broken, because when you tell the raw truth they question you, but when you sound broken they believe you. I told her that they didn't believe me, that nobody believed me, that they were stealing my children from me. I didn't mention legal details, I didn't mention evaluations, I didn't mention reports, just that base message that goes straight to the instinct to protect. They're taking what's mine. And in my head my children's strange rejection was no longer, "They're fine." It was proof that they were already being manipulated, that Mauricio was already planting that version where I was a stranger. And that's when I did what any reasonable person would do in the face of a conspiracy. That's what I told myself. Act without warning. Because to warn is to give them time. To warn is to ask for permission. To warn is to wait for Mauricio to have his stable father face ready in front of another adult and leave me looking like a hysteric. I had already learned that when you play fair, the system beats you in advance. I waited for them at the exit of an after-school activity. I chose that place because it's fast, because there's movement, because people are distracted, because nobody wants to get involved. I stood to the side with my heart pounding in my chest, looking at every child that came out as if they were a universe. When I finally saw them, I felt that brutal relief of seeing them alive, close, within arm's reach. That's what the system doesn't understand. It's not a visit, it's breathing. I didn't go calmly, I went with urgency. I walked straight up and grabbed their hands firmly, like someone recovering something that was taken from them by mistake. I told them, let's go now, without questions, as if it were a surprise. In my head, if I could get them to walk 10 steps with me, it was done. 10 steps to go back to being a mom with decision-making power. One resisted, not out of hatred, but out of confusion, out of fear of change. And that resistance set off my panic, because panic is the enemy of gentleness. I pulled him harder. The other one screamed, and that sound pierced me like a knife, because in that second I saw how the world would interpret it, not as a desperate mother, but as a woman taking 2 children by force. For a moment, so that they wouldn't attract the attention of Mauricio or some supervisor, I put my hand over one of their mouths. 1 second. Not to harm him. Not to suffocate him. Don't invent movies. It was a reflex of, shut up, please, just a second. But the world doesn't see reflexes, it sees scenes. And then I heard an adult approaching, a lady, with an alarmed tone, and I felt the dry blow of panic. I was no longer a mother recovering, I was a woman trying to take them away by force. At that moment I saw it clearly like a photo. Me pulling, a child screaming, an adult coming, people looking. And I knew that Mauricio was going to win that round without saying a word, because the system loves an image more than 1,000 explanations, and I had just given them the perfect image. Comments on Update 3. Anonymous User 1 says, what you're describing is an attempted kidnapping. Pulling your children, covering one's mouth so he doesn't scream. Do you hear yourself? It's not a conspiracy, it's that you're dangerous when you don't control the narrative. OP's response. Dangerous is the word you love because it makes you feel right. I wasn't hurting anyone. I was recovering my children in an unfair situation. Or is motherhood now cancelled by a stamp? Covering his mouth for a second was to prevent a circus from starting and Mauricio from arriving like a hero. You talk as if I were a monster, but you ignore how monstrous it is to separate a mother from her children and expect her to smile. Anonymous User I says, your children screamed because they were afraid of you and the adult approached because they saw you as a threat. That's the reality, not a misunderstanding. Your children were telling you they're fine, and you decided to drag them away anyway. OP's response. They didn't scream out of fear of me, they screamed out of confusion and shock, because they've already been brainwashed into thinking that everything I do is suspicious. If a child is repeatedly told, Mom is unwell, any movement from Mom becomes terrifying. And yes, the adult approached, because that's what people do when they see an incomplete scene. They think they're saviors without knowing anything. The reality is that I was acting against a system that had already condemned me. Update 4. The police showed up before my mind could come up with an excuse. That's the cruelest part. They don't even give you a second to arrange your words. Uniforms, radios, that presence that turns your version into an instant lie. I saw one officer with his hand near his holster. I saw another looking at my children as if I were a biological hazard, and I understood that at that moment it no longer mattered what I said. The script was already written. I let go of my children when I saw the panicked look on one of their faces. Not because I regretted it, but because I'm smart enough to know when the stage becomes impossible. I wasn't going to fight there in public with police around, because that would turn me into what they wanted. The unstable woman confirming the report, and I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. Instead of staying to explain, I did what the system always expects from the guilty. I ran. And don't give me morals now, because when the world has already decided you're a monster, staying is just waiting for the cage. I ran on pure instinct, for pure preservation. It was as if my body knew before my head that any word would be used as evidence. I drove without feeling my hands, as if the steering wheel weren't real. In my mind, it wasn't running from the police, it was going back to the last place where someone still saw me as a daughter, my parents' house. They were my refuge, my base, my network. I hadn't yet accepted that a network can also let you go when fear overcomes love. I arrived with my heart in my throat, my hair stuck to my face, and I started knocking on the door as if the wood could understand urgency. I yelled at them to open up, that it was their daughter, that I was being chased. I didn't ask for permission, I demanded, because when you're in a panic you don't negotiate. You just need someone to let you in. Inside, nothing was heard at first, no footsteps, not my mother's voice, not the typical noise of a living house. Only that thick silence that isn't absence, it's a decision. And that silence hit me harder than any patrol car. Why did a horrible idea suddenly cross my mind? What if they've already been called? What if they've chosen a side? I knocked again harder. I told them the judge was crazy, that Mauricio was manipulating, that it was all a trap. I spat out words as if they were keys to open doors, but the door remained the same, closed, and I started to feel that hot shame that rises when you understand you're being left outside on purpose. And then I heard in the distance the sound that breaks your soul, a siren approaching, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to tell you, we've found you. I turned and saw the empty street, my long shadow, and that closed door that was once home and was now a wall. And I understood that the point of no return wasn't the courthouse, it was this, being outside asking to be believed and getting silence as an answer. Comments on Update 4. Anonymous User 1 says, "You ran because you knew what you did was wrong. If it were a rescue, you stay, you explain, you fight legally, but you ran like a criminal and now you expect your parents to be accomplices too." OP's response, "I ran because the system doesn't listen, it punishes." That's the difference you refuse to understand. Staying to explain was surrendering to a narrative that was already closed where I'm the crazy one. No, thanks. And I'm not asking for accomplices, I'm asking for family. If your own parents don't open the door when you're desperate, then what's the point of the word family? Anonymous User 2 says, "Your parents stayed silent because they finally saw who you were." It's not about sides, it's about protection. You were the danger and your children were the ones who paid for your episode. OP's response, "How convenient to say, they finally saw. As if you were inside that house. My parents are scared. That's all. Scared of the judge, of the police, of Mauricio, of the report, of what people will say. And yes, my children are in the middle, but not because of me, because of a system that believes motherhood can be administered with paperwork and clinical labels." Update 5. My mother didn't open, my father didn't either. Instead, I barely saw the curtain move 1 millimeter, as if they were watching me without wanting me to see them. That minimal gesture made me angrier than an argument, because it meant they were there, they heard me and still decided not to touch the door lock. They decided I was a risk, not their daughter. Then I heard my father's voice behind the door. He didn't sound angry, he sounded subdued, like someone who has already made a decision and is trying not to feel anything. He said my bags were outside, just like that, as if it were a formality, as if my life could be packed into 2 bags and a suitcase and left on the sidewalk for anyone to take. I turned and there they were, 2 bags and a suitcase, humiliating, exposed, as proof that I no longer had a home. It wasn't just leave, it was, "We've taken you off the map." My mother finally spoke, but not to comfort me. She said Mauricio showed them everything, the report and the video. Video. That word pierced me because in a rationalizer's head everything is interpretable, debatable, until a recording appears. I asked, "What video?" although I already knew. Because when you ask you by seconds to prepare a defense. My mother didn't respond with emotion. She responded with that legal tone that those who are already convinced they're doing the right thing use. She said they couldn't risk it, that they were going to request visits as grandparents directly with Mauricio, that I couldn't come in again, that if I insisted they would call the police for the children's safety. For the children's safety, as if I were an infection. I told them they were choosing money. How clear. Mauricio now has a promotion, has stability, has a lawyer, has a judge, has everything. I told them they were selling me out, and my father, again subdued, said it wasn't about money, it was about fear. And that, honestly, is the same thing with a different label. Fear always kneels before whoever seems more stable. The patrol car arrived while I was still there with the suitcases as proof that I had been emotionally evicted. I saw the lights reflect on the closed door. I saw the officers get out with that routine calm, as if I were a package to be picked up. I tried to talk, I tried to explain, I tried to be human again, but it didn't matter anymore. I was the case. When they handcuffed me, the sickest part was this. My mind kept working to fit the puzzle in my favor. Of course, my parents chose Mauricio because he looks good. Of course, the judge scared them with the report. Of course, everyone prefers the stable man. I kept building the story where I was the only one who saw the truth, because that story is the only thing I had left to not disintegrate right there on the sidewalk. And yet, at night, the only thing that breaks me is not having lost the case or having lost the house. It's that phrase from my children, said without hatred, without the intention of hurting me. We're fine with Dad, we're happy, because if they don't miss me, then the biggest conspiracy isn't the judges, or Mauricio's, or my parents. It's the possibility that I was the problem from the beginning, and that idea, honestly, is the only one I can't allow. Comments on Update 5. Anonymous User 1 says, your parents closed the door on you because they saw you try to take them by force. That's not fear of the judge, it's common sense. And the most terrifying thing is that you still reduce it to they chose money. No, Elena, they chose the children. OP's response, how nice it sounds to say, they chose the children, when you're not the one left with nothing on a sidewalk. My parents didn't see context, they saw a clip, a report, a version packaged to scare them. That's not common sense, it's guided panic. And yes, money influences even if they deny it, because stability buys credibility. They labeled me, they rewarded him. That's the reality. Anonymous User I says, the only honest sentence you wrote is the last one. I can't allow the idea of being the problem. There it is. You don't love your children, you love the idea of being a mother as a role, and when they took it from you, you became dangerous. OP's response, I love my children, and precisely for that reason I don't accept being erased with diagnoses and stamps. You confuse danger with desperation because it's more comfortable to demonize a mother than to admit that the system destroys bonds as if they were papers. And yes, I'm not going to allow them to make me the official villain, because that would be letting everyone win with the most profitable lie, that the stable man is always the good one and the woman who fights is always crazy.